So, how do you destroy a legacy in virtually what seems like a single moment, but it's backed by so many other bad choices? Now, I've been building brands for 23 years. I know I might not look like it, but I've been behind the scene on some iconic brands and working with some great startups and other companies all over the United States and some brands internationally. Now, what Bud Light has done, or the VP rather, of marketing, has violated some very basic principles on how to actually do a proper brand strategy and go to market because there's so many holes. So let me go ahead and hit you with some disclaimers because I know that's going to be a thing that we need to talk about. But I'm going to keep it real with you because there's a lot of things here that I see that's being done across the board, and there's so much politics behind it. We need to address it because this one instance of Bud Light with Dylan Mulvaney is one of others that people are soon going to start bringing light to. So here's the thing. I don't care what your gender is. I care about your character. And I'm never going to give a job to anybody just because they're another Asian cat. I don't care. Can you do the job or can't you? I think that's the question here, is because the job wasn't done for the vice president of marketing at Bud Light. And my critical oversight on this one is going to be done so from my background and expertise on doing this. My viewpoints, my personal ones, I'm going to push the majority of them aside here, but there's so many things we need to unwrap because the problem here is the toxic inclusiveness that's taken over so many marketing campaigns. And toxic inclusiveness is this assimilation, forced assimilation of making sure everybody else just follows the minority agenda. And I'm saying that as a minority, so don't get it twisted. There's a proper ethical guideline we must follow when we're developing a brand or developing the culture itself or any sort of representation. If you want representation, I'll talk to you about representation, but we're not here for a tit-for-tat battle. I want to break this down because it's important that I'm looking at this from every avenue. I even have business partners that are from the LGBT community. And although I'm here and accepting everybody as there is, we gotta really stop following this ideology of tokenism and wokeness. Because the problem with woke marketing is that it's just fueling a chip on your shoulder. The incessant barrage of people trying to force people to accept them and validate them is destroying the fabric of our entire country, let alone brands. And there's so many problems wrong with this marketing campaign. So I'm going to break down piece by piece what's wrong with it from a professional place and how we can actually try to fix it or how it should have been done. So the problem here is that we need to look at some other variables. There's a lot of tone deafness in all of this, which we will go ahead and cover. But we can also argue that maybe it's algorithm chasing. And to some degree, I believe so. Tim Cass actually talked about this on his podcast. Let me illustrate this, is that I will research everybody, whether I like them, don't like them, agree with them, don't agree with them. I don't always agree with Tim Cass. But Tim has actually had a lot of good information and comments and variables in this, along with a lot of other people in media on both political sides. And let me make this clear. I don't fall to any side. I think they're all wrong. And that's the last I'm going to go ahead and put my personal opinion in on this one. But it's important you know that I'm going to come at this very real, very hard, because wokeness as a strategy is one of the most ridiculous things. Wokeness is just an emotionally tirade fuel of instability. There's a lot of issues here. The forced assimilation is actually one of the biggest issues that I have with toxic inclusion, because you're forcing other people just to include. And, inclusion, ethical inclusion is a good thing. But unfortunately, these brands are constantly forcing their way of life down everybody else's throats to accept them. You don't have to accept anybody. Just like you don't have to respect me. And for me to force you to respect me is a ridiculous thing to do or even try to attempt to do. So we need to actually have more people read the book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck, because there's a lot of people that need to read that instead of forcing people to accept them. And we see this bleed into marketing campaigns. And it's backfired in so many different ways, creating more division between people and my fellow countrymen. So we need to look at this piece by piece. Now, I'm going to go ahead and read some of the things that she said, and I got them word for word what she said in this most recent interview, and we're going to break it down, and I'm going to show you why it is a terrible brand strategy. So let's talk about young drinkers, and the challenge here is to get new lifeblood into a brand. This is 101 stuff. This is 101 on how you actually build a marketing campaign or marketing positioning on keeping the brand as a legacy brand going. And there's so many different ways to go about this. One of the first things that we need to do here is define the right buyer demographics. Unfortunately, with wokeism and this kind of marketing approach, a lot of people are trying to fabricate the audiences that they align with personally rather than what the brand should be. Now, in my personal brand strategy courses, I talk about your personal brand needs to be different from your actual business. These are the same principles. This is 101 stuff. And so the problem and hurdle with younger audiences is that they're being more health conscious. Within the male community, a lot of people don't realize this, but there's a lot of men telling other men to stop drinking, to be better, to improve who they are as a person. Stop drinking, stop chasing women, stop doing this, go work on you and be the best version of you. Now, this is a narrative I can fully get behind. So we have someone who is completely inept on actually developing and creating a proper brand strategy. This is the very first thing that you do when you create a brand strategy. Figure out who your buyers are and then how you're going to align with them. Not go reverse order. It's like, hey, this is the idea. Let's force people to assimilate to this. And it's important to be inclusive, but we got to do it right. I'm going to break that down a little bit more later on. And so one of the things that I think that could have been done here was creating more of possibly a mentorship program. Now, Gillette, with their entire woke strategy, vilifying and belittling men and devaluing them, it hit them hard. But I think in this case, people have had enough. People have had enough of just the assimilation, the tyrannical approach at forcing beliefs because some people cannot deal with things emotionally. The first thing that she said was that it was to evolve and elevate the brand. But what does that even mean? For me, it didn't make any sense. And I've been doing this a long time. So these questions that I ask my clients, this is not one of them that I would ask immediately. You need to define what the brand is about in the first place. And what she said was, it meant inclusivity, shifting the tone, feeling lighter and brighter, and appealing to elevate this incredibly iconic brand. Well, what wasn't lighthearted and brighter about it in the first place? This makes zero logical sense. Lighter and brighter has been Bud Light's ethos for the longest time. It's always been about tongue-in-cheek. It's always been about stupid humor that anybody can get. And it gives zero credit to the 20 years of award-winning work of the commercials that embody the brand and its audience. And this entire approach was very narrow-minded. It's a very narrow perspective because she goes on to say and question what elevate means. And for her, said it meant inclusivity. Okay, I'm gonna stop you right here. No, it doesn't. It does not mean inclusivity. That is not what elevate means. Elevate means giving a superior product, making something better. That what means elevate the brand, it means make it better, not from a biased position. Elevating the brand means, it doesn't even mean inclusion because there's another way that I would approach inclusion, and I'll go over that here, but Bud Light was not about choosing sides. It was about beer pong. It was about parties, the Super Bowl, or shotgunning it, but it didn't care what gender you were. The only people that I really see argue over beer are IPA drinkers and non-IPA drinkers. I've brewed beer. I do it with my buddies, and that's a thing that we do. And there's another video on my YouTube channel. Go watch it. We're doing it. And if you want to actually understand your audience, Go drink the product. Go be with the people. Go do something instead of sitting there with your Ivy League, very poorly executed. Just this really right now for me, looking at this professionally, and some slight personal opinion here is that the Ivy League education here did absolutely nothing. All it did was help her position herself to get to a platform to push something that she argued needed more feminine representation. Now, I'm not against women of representation. Look at this skin. I'm brown. You want to talk representation? Let's talk about it. But Bud Light, when was it never appealing to women? That's my question. And then for me, there's a ritual that my buddies and I go to. Billy's Tavern, Wing Night, the bucket of Bud Light didn't have men on it. We had people there, men, women, we would invite everybody. Bud Light was already inclusive. It didn't care. And the representation here, you've heard me talk about it. The job here is to be marketing VP. The job here is to elevate the brand, bring more brand awareness, make it appealing to everybody, not alienate an entire market demographic that was already your buyer. And there's a rule in sales. And this rule in sales is that when you're actually building your company, and in this rule in marketing, one of the number one rules in marketing is that instead of trying to market to a new clientele, first immediately go to your current clientele, because it's going to cost you 10 times as much money to market to new demographics. You need to build within the low-hanging fruit and build on top of that as you build your brand. And like I said, there's so many principles here that were violated. Bud Light being called this fratty, out of touch with humor, was a very personal, biased narrative and way to look at it, as she digs at all the current customers that were already buying beer. And regardless if they like the taste of it or not, it was easy to drink. And that's the difference here. It's understanding the beer that you're drinking. There's certain companies that I love going to that have different beers. Some have milk stouts. Some of them have a lager that I love. I have friends that own a microbrewery. And the entire culture and demographic is so completely different from marketing Bud Light. All right, slight interruption, because just recently, as I'm editing this, some images came out from the VP of marketing the Bud Light of someone. These photos that you see here are actually leaked images from an album entitled I don't know if I can say this, and I'm just going to go ahead and put it here. So it looks awfully hypocritical of what the narrative is here for fratty. So this is the thing, guys. This is a personal brand issue now. This is stuff I coach on. Is that your personal brand at all times must reflect everything. Now, we all have skeletons in our closet. We all have done things that we might regret. But we must not be naive to our own hypocrisy. And unfortunately, I'm just sharing, basically, this is the stuff on the New York Post. And so I don't really have a lot of respect for them. But the fact is that this is irrefutable evidence of the hypocrisy that is, one, as you vilify the thing that you've taken part in. So, I'm not here to pass complete judgment on her as her personal life. I don't care. What I do care about is poor representation and manipulating things in a very professional instance to push your brand. This is unethical on many regards to push your own agenda. Now, I know people's belief systems change, but it is what it is. The humor is not out of touch. It's the inability for people to understand humor and have a backbone and thick skin to not be offended by humor. That's the problem. And let me talk to you about Bud Light and the brand as a fratty, out of touch humor thing. Here's the thing. Let me talk to you about guys' night. Guys' night is not about us going to strip clubs all the time and just dumping money. I'm going to tell you right now, it's about the fact that men can be men. And that means that they can be the 10-year-old self with their buddies who are doing stupid things with each other. That's what guys' night is about. That's what we get together and we drink beer and we have these experiences. And we're not sitting there bashing women or trans or anybody else. We're just drinking. And the notion is that it had to be this gender political war of this biased narrative for representation. Go put some Asian cat on the can. Go do it. You won't. You won't. And, the whole thing with her saying that it was really important that we had another approach. I completely agree, but you failed at that. Let me talk about the commercials. She said that it needed a feminine-focused approach. That right there tells you everything. It was a feminine agenda. Now, I have nothing against women. I coach women entrepreneurs. I have nothing against women lifting themselves up. But the fact is that this divisiveness was all fueled by some contempt for men and this frattiness, where she completely missed the mark on what the brand was about. And that's the first thing you do. Figure out what the brand is about. And so some of the commercials talked about here were the Super Bowl ad. She said she fast forwarded it. She cast an incredible female choreographer who just brought incredible, positive, amazing energy to the spot. Why is that necessary to push the beer? The problem here is that it was all run by a feminist agenda. And I will argue that I really don't believe that it was a proper representation, because with equal representation means equal representation of everybody. And I've already talked about this a few times. I have nothing against choreographers. I own a hip-hop breakdance fitness company, y'all. We got choreographers. I've got business partners that do this stuff. And so I'm coming to you with experience on this. She also talked about that they cast Miles Teller and his wife, Kelly Teller. But, quote unquote, it was really crucial to me that if you really see that spot, Kelly is the heartbeat of that spot. Why? It's not about beer. It's about you pushing an agenda. So you're seeing this whole thing experienced through Kelly. She's the heartbeat. It's amazing that I'm here doing this right now. But people want to sit here and get fueled about the emotions of this. But this is an awful strategy to sell beer. It really, really is. And this is an awful approach to build any marketing campaign. She said, I would sort of argue with what propels you through that experience, and that was intentional. She's talking about Kelly. I can't even... I'm having a hard time, guys, getting through this right now, because of just how egregious and ridiculous this entire approach is for this brand, and I'm talking from a place of experience here, a place of how to build a brand, and this is not how you do it. She also said that we had another really fun spot out of the gate. Was the first time ever we had a female protagonist. And this was really cool. She was sort of bobbing and weaving through a bar. But here's the thing. If you really look at that commercial, she was attacking men by emasculating them in the commercial. My friends, this is, correct me if I'm wrong, a form of gaslighting. Putting down someone else so you feel better. This is not how you create inclusion. This is toxic inclusion. This is just erasing. This is almost some form of appropriation. And I know that's reaching here, but I don't want to be too hyperbolic in that. But let's talk about some of the solutions. What should have been done here from a marketing position? So if I'm in that spot, here's what I would have done. She wanted to bring awareness to the brand. Absolutely. That should have been the question over inclusion. Now, where were the conversations in developing all this? She said that she wanted to include people that thought like her. Well, that's the problem. You got a bunch of yes men. I don't need a bunch of people on my staff that agree with everything I have to say because I might be wrong. You need people that have the ability to push back and tell you, hey, let's reconsider this approach. I want to ask here for the marketing KPIs. What were the conversions? Is there a rise in new beer drinkers? Because it's shown that there's $4 billion loss. Somebody actually on TikTok, this left-wing girl, she actually ended up saying, and mind you, I was a Democrat for years until I couldn't take it anymore. She argued that there's a lot of market research that's done in this, and they wouldn't risk the brands by doing this. Well, unfortunately, they did, because the brand data should have told you where to go. Inclusion as a marketing campaign is just terrible, because the question here is this going to stick? Is this going to be bad? Because there's a lot of other brands and people out there that are actually going to sit here and really bring light to this issue even more so. My other question here is, if I'm in this role, why do people drink our beer? Because if you really drink beer and you appreciate it for what it truly is, you got people that love the beer that they drink. There's these other brands out there that release these limited runs, and me and my buddies get together and we drink it, and we talk about which ones we like, we didn't like. We're experimenting, understanding the flavors of beer and for the love of beer. You don't drink Bud Light as a beer that you just love. You drink it because it's cheap. There's a lot of other reasons that you drink it, but you got to ask yourself these core fundamental questions, which she didn't. But the other question I had to ask is, why is Bud Light failing in the first place? Why is it really, truly failing? Aside from the political agendas and the backlash there, as a brand, it's been failing for a while. But why? And you can't compete with microbreweries with this. You can't. Because microbreweries have this other family, this kind of culture within it, a community. And people go there because it's Cheers. It's your bar. It's the place you go. These questions were completely just overlooked in developing a proper brand strategy. Now, I want to talk to you about the strategies I would do, and then we're going to go ahead and wrap. So what I would have done was, one, define the brand. I would have figured out, what is this brand itself? Because as Asian, I don't need the beer to represent me. I don't need my microphone to represent me. I don't need any of this stuff to represent me. We need to take ourselves out of this bias agenda that we all have when developing marketing campaigns. We need to define the brand, figure out what the brand is really truly about. And for me, that's about fun. That's about humor. I would lead into the humor, find humor that connects everybody. And the brand itself is cheap. You don't buy it for anything other than the fact that it's cheap. It's easy to drink. You buy it for parties and beer pong. I would actually sponsor probably a beer pong competition. I know they sponsor different events, dart events, things like that. Sponsor a beer pong competition. Make it about everybody else. The fact is that when we push these narratives, we're not talking about the product anymore. We're talking about ourselves. And any brand that I touch, I make sure that I'm not putting my own personal opinion on it. And there's a rule that I have. Leave your religion, politics, and social agendas out of the business unless the business is built on that framework. So the other thing what I would do is use humor. Like I said, I would use humor to de-escalate all the tension. Instead of using this agenda, don't add to it by commenting and insulting the humor that's been there for years, that's made so many people laugh and brought people together. And people I still hear dudes talking about the Budweiser frogs from time to time. They're really drunk, but I hear them. Even if they're drinking a Yingling or something else, they're still doing it. And this is iconic brand building. The other thing I would do is find humor in something that connects us all. Because we can't care about and coddle every single person that gets butthurt over any single joke. And that's the problem. You're not going to please everybody, but don't alienate 95% of your entire audience. The other thing I would actually figure out is, like I said, what does the brand stand for? What is this brand? What does it really, really stand for? Leaning into your existing audience is one of the most important things you can do. Some ways I might have done this was make the cans super patriotic, but make it, if you want inclusion, make it about everybody. Here's a campaign that was iconic. Real men of genius, or real American heroes. Switch that up. Relight that campaign up and make it about real American heroes and bring everybody in. Reinvigorate what was there, what worked. Don't do things that you think are just there to serve your own personal agenda. One thing I would have done was release some commemorative cans with the Geauxst flag, Betsy can on it. Release multiple things. But the entire campaign, since she's been running things, has been fueled by one agenda, and that's the problem. You know, the ethical ways of going about this have been completely thrown out the window, and that's the thing. When you want to be inclusive, there's ethical ways to do that. So I want to actually give you 3 little commercial spots because I would give this a Bordeaux brand score of an F. Because the way I would have actually imagined the commercials going would have been a bunch of people chilling on a lake, having a good time, just hanging out. Everybody's there, everybody. And they're just drinking, having a great time. There's nothing else going on except for the fact that they're just enjoying their lives with each other, fully accepting each other as they already are. You could have representation in all of it. Or maybe a backyard barbecue where gender and identities and none of that shit matters. You're just there having a good time, enjoying this light, fun experience, cheering a Bud Light. Or even, this is another one. This is one's crazy. Just imagine the whole guys like peeing in the snow. That's what they do. Let's say that a guy is out there, he's peeing in the snow, he's outside of a bar, woman comes out, looks at him, and it's almost like, hey, what are you doing? And he just looks at her, but then she joins him and does some ridiculous fucking amazing artwork in the same spirit. And then they cheers later on. Respect. It's ridiculous, I know, but there's so many ways about going about this. So my final thoughts is that this was a horrible, from a very professional, expert opinion, this is the way you do not want to build a brand strategy or go about having to do your brand strategy. You could download a brand strategy, a free PDF from virtually every brand agency out there. And she would have not hit any of those marks because she didn't. Social agendas need to stay out of marketing. Bud Light is in the crosshairs. Their sub-brands are in the crosshairs. Ultimately, this is an F. Terrible job. And I really don't understand how she got this position or how she's going to keep it. Because I can tell you now, there's a lot of guys out there that are never going to pick up a Budweiser, Anheuser-Busch product ever again.